Okay, I think we are now live. Hello, everybody. It is Kat from Scratch Magazine, and I am joined today live with the incredible Victoria Brownlie, who is the Director of Policy and Public Affairs with the National Hair and Beauty Federation. Hi.
Hello, nice to
How are
see you.
how are you?
Very well, thank you. How
Oh,
about you?
brilliant. Yeah, good, thank you. Really, really good. So for those that aren't quite aware, the NHBF stands for the National Hair and Beauty Federation. It is an independent trade association purely dedicated to the hair and beauty industry. And I think it's fair to say that you guys have been taking the industry's concern to the highest level possible at government throughout the whole of this pandemic and, of course, before. Um, and so one of those ways that you guys have been raising concerns in that is through an amazing industry body, which I believe you formed quite recently, which has seen you work with BABTAC, the British Beauty Council and the UK Spa Association. So you've become a bit of an alliance, and all I can say is a bit of a powerhouse. So would you mind sort of talking us through what that alliance has been doing and how you guys have been working together?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're right. We're hopefully a bit of a powerhouse now. There's four very strong women there leading the fray. It basically came about that we were trying to get better representation in the for the sector in wider government. And what we found at the beginning of lockdown was we were sort of pulled in with various other sectors that had very different needs and problems and issues than what we had as a sector. So we were originally put in with retail businesses, and then we were put in with the likes of restaurants and hospitality. And we wanted to be recognised standalone as having our very own, very independent and original issues and things that affect us as business owners. So we've managed to get a specific group set up within the Department for Business within government. And that's as a result of our four organisations over that time working out that we actually shared a lot of very common goals, and we worked very well together and sort of understanding the task ahead, and that we were prepared to sort of be working those late nights and the weekends and things to be putting together a case to present to government. And yeah, so basically it's just naturally occurred over the time that we've just worked out that we work very well together, and that's where it's come from, really.
Amazing. There's such a sort of a shared sort of goal, isn't there? It's
Yeah.
amazing. Um, so it was one of the sort of newsworthy things, it would have been hard to miss, is the budget that was announced at the beginning of the month, which on the surface saw some hopefully some lifelines for quite a few businesses in the personal care sector. But as always with these announcements, a little extra clarification is always beneficial.
Yeah.
And one of those sort of real headline grabbers was, of course, the restart grants. The budget saw 5 billion put aside for these grants, and I believe up to £18,000 per business could be claimed by those in the personal care sector. But of course, that amount is dependent on rateable value, as well as a number of other factors to consider. But I was wondering if you could maybe sort of start by maybe clearing up a little bit about what they are, who can apply, and sort of how and when, most importantly, can those businesses access those life-saving funds.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's important to say that this time last year, the grant that we got offered was substantially less than that.
Yes,
And
of
what we've
course
been
it was.
campaigning for was we basically presented an argument to government to show, out of the amount of fixed outgoings we have each month and the amount of grants and reliefs that we're getting in other ways from government, what the gap is in money, the debt that's just growing each month. It's absolutely not funny, but
Yeah.
the debt that's growing each month from businesses having not enough money coming in to meet all of those needs. And we managed to communicate that to be one of only two sectors that got actually the higher level grant, despite the fact we're going to be one of the first groups of businesses to be able to reopen, hopefully on the 12th of April. But yeah, as part of that grant, so it's the restart grant. It's linked to your rateable value, so you have to be a premises-based business owner. And there's three levels to it. So if your rateable value is under £15,000, you'd be eligible for £8,600. 15 to £51,000 rateable value is 12,000, and then anything over 51 is the 18,000. So the issue with our industry is that we have quite a lot of people that might not necessarily have their own premises. They might rent a space or a chair, or they might be freelance or work within their own home. So those businesses wouldn't be able to apply for the Restart grant. It will be that they'll be eligible under the Self-Employed Income Support Scheme. And there's been some issues around that where that fund hasn't given any money out since November. And now we're looking at a situation where, yes, the Chancellor did say he's going to continue giving money through the Self-Employed Income Support Scheme, but that the next period by which people can claim isn't until the end of April, most likely the beginning of May. So that's a really long time for people to go with no support. So I think from the budget, that was a win, in the sense of we're really pleased we've got the higher amount of money for people with premises, and we're really pleased that the self-employed income support is there for people that don't have premises. But what we tried to convey throughout this whole period when we were making the case for needing financial support was that we're losing businesses every day now. Businesses might not even get to the point of reopening on the 12th of April unless they can have an immediate cash injection to stop them from going bust, bankrupt right now, and that they're going to be needing to buy things like PPE, get their businesses sorted prior to the 12th of April date. And we're worried that the money's not going to come in time for them to make those preparations. Because the issue with the Restart grant is that the application date is likely to be the beginning of April, but that might be depending, and they're trying to sort this out, to be fair to them. But there's been issues before with a bit of a hold up in the amount of time between that initial application process and then the money actually getting into people's accounts. So it could very well be that the 12th of April comes and the Restart grant money still isn't with some businesses. And that's a real worry for us. So it's something that we raised immediately after the budget. And the answer from government is, and it was mentioned also in the budget, was that there's these things called additional restrictions grants, and that's the name that the government's given it. But unfortunately, local authorities helpfully sometimes rename it to a more sexy name in their own areas. So it could be anything, called anything in your local authority, but it's basically around the principle of almost like a hardship grant. So if you can make a case on a case-by-case basis, so it's not that you have to necessarily fit within a really rigid criteria that the government grants set. The local authority will set their own eligibility criteria, which will mean that they can give out grants of whatever amount that they choose to businesses in their area that they feel have the biggest need. But the problem we've had up till now is the local authorities have been given £1.6 billion to date for this fund, and they've only spent 13% of it. So that's a massive amount still left to spend, and with businesses that really, really need it immediately, quite frankly. So we've been working with government and local authorities and the local communities minister, with MPs that can work with their local authorities, and also set up a template letter for business owners to send out as well, just really urging local authorities to be expanding that criteria that they're giving this money, by which they're using to give out the money, and get that money actually going into people's accounts more quickly. So the arguments that they've come back with are around the fact that the money was meant to be lasting them until next financial year end. So that's the end of March 2022. And so they've been sort of squirreling the money away, saving it for a rainy day, really, in case towards the winter we end up being in another situation where they need to give businesses more financial support. So what the government have done in the budget is that they've set aside an additional £425 million to say, once you've spent that 1.6 billion, we will give you another 425 million to see you through to the end of the financial year, but you need to be spending this money. So really what I'd say is businesses that are struggling now, that need the money today, contact your local authority, ask them about the additional restrictions grant. They'll know if they've renamed it, you can call it that, and they'll know what you're referring to, and really just get that process moving of making your case as to why your business is a safe bet in terms of, if they give you this money, this is how you'll use it to once again be profitable and successful once you're able to reopen. But really to just get you to that point of being able to reopen, and that would be eligible. We want that to be eligible for anybody, whether or not they've going to be able to get the self-employed income support, whether or not they're going to be able to get the Restart grant, whether or not they've even had a previous grant before from the local authority or have potentially been turned down before. This is new advice from government to say, relook at your eligibility criteria and get that money out of your doors into businesses in your area. So look at it with a fresh pair of eyes, really. So if you're struggling and you need that money now, basically contact your local authority, contact your local MP. That's what they're there for. They're there to work on behalf of their constituents. You are a constituent that's bringing in money into your local area through your business. They have a responsibility to work on your behalf. Let's get this money actually into people's accounts. It's there just waiting to be taken. And that's what's the frustration with that.
Very much so. And I think more than ever, everything that's been going on has highlighted how important our industry is to its local communities. All of these businesses need that lifeline. So that, yes, you heard it here, you need to get your application in to your local authority. So you touched on the self-employed support grants. The budget also brought an extension to those. So again, would you mind touching on what it is and who is eligible? Because we need to make use of this extension.
So it's much the same as it was before, except that now if you have a tax return that you filed for the most recent tax year up to the 2nd of March, you will now be eligible as well. So they estimated that's another 600,000 businesses will be eligible that weren't eligible before, which is great.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and it's still going to be 80% of your average profits over a 3-month period, up to £7,500. And then from the 5th instalment, which they've committed to, which will take you up until the end of September, that one, which you'll be able to apply for from July, will be 80% if you can prove that you have lost more than 30% of your earnings as a result of the pandemic, and 30% if you haven't lost more than 30% of your income. I think it's safe to say, because of the close contact guidance that we have to implement as a sector, we will very easily be impacted by more than 30%, because we've got some of the toughest guidance of any sector in terms of limits to the number of people we can see at one time in one space, the amount of wiping down and cleaning of this area, which therefore affects the amount of time that you have to see clients. Well, I have no doubt that people will be easily eligible for the 80% for the last instalment. But basically the self-employed income support should see us through to the end of September, which is in line with furlough, the continuation of furlough if employers choose to keep furloughing their staff on a full-time or part-time basis. They'll still have full support to do that. 80% up until the end of June, and then July and August. Businesses will be expected to pay 10% contribution in July and 20% contribution in August and September. And then at the moment, the plan is that the furlough scheme will end at the end of September. But the idea is, and whether that happens or not, is that we will be out of social distancing requirements and things by the 21st of June. And so things like the additional mask wearing and need to comply with additional restrictions should be gone by that point. And so therefore we should be operating on a more pre-COVID basis is the hope. And that's what we're all keeping everything crossed for.
Yeah, of course, but a lot of businesses are going to take some time to recover financially from all of this. It's going to have a real impact for sure. And this self-employed income support grant, is that again a case of going to your local authority and chasing them down?
So it will be working on the same basis as you'd applied for the previous grant. So I can't remember which people that you contact with regards to that one, but it's exactly the same process. So if you've been in receipt of it previously, it will follow exactly the same process as it did before.
Amazing. So we've had a question from Tony Winder pop up, but it is also very much in line with what my next question was, is a lot of mobile and home-based businesses, they really feel like through all of this, they've perhaps sort of fallen through the cracks, is the term I would use. I feel unfortunately really sort of forgotten. I know that you guys have been working on a Chop the VAT initiative. How do you think that will help? And is there any further support that is out there for that category of worker?
Well, I'd say that the chop the VAT actually probably wouldn't really help the
Right.
more mobile, those kind of businesses,
Mhm.
because the chop the VAT really is mainly for people that are paying, have premises and therefore are paying VAT
Mhm.
on those kind of things, have members of staff and therefore would come under a different category. But with the mobile and freelance, I think what we found more and more is, because the way that the VAT works within our sector specifically, it's moving people to a more self-employed model. And therefore we are creating more and more freelance and mobile businesses, or people that rent spaces within
Yeah.
a wider premises. And so now we're in a situation where 60% of the industry comes under that category. And so therefore, when we bring in measures to support business premises-based businesses, actually the majority of our sector isn't supported by that, other than by the fact that if you're renting a space within a salon, that by saving that salon-based business, you're then in turn being helped by the fact that you can still use that space and work within that company. But yeah, I think with the mobile and freelance, they're some of the highest proportion of people, which we identified. There was about 18% of the sector that's received no support since last year, which now, when we're looking at a year on, I do not even know how these people are continuing to live. And my heart absolutely goes out to them. And we raise this point at every opportunity of the people that are, like you say, falling through the gaps in terms of support. The self-employed income support, now that you have that additional amount, additional period, if you've got your latest tax return, that should help a proportion of those businesses that might have been newly self-employed.
Yeah.
We've also got the issue of people that might have paid themselves in dividends as company directors, as opposed to doing so through a normal payroll way.
Yeah.
Those people, they have been eligible under the existing criteria of the additional restrictions grants I mentioned. So I had a meeting with a local authority last week, and they said that they've been specifically focusing on giving money out to directors in that situation, because they identified there was a lot of businesses in their local area that worked on that business model. So unfortunately, there's not a one support fits all for that category. And by their very nature, they have quite intricate and individual issues and needs and reasons why they weren't eligible for the particular bands of support that came in. So it's much more tricky, but that's why the ARG grant is so good, in the sense that it's really on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah.
So as strongly as you can make that argument, and more you can work with your local authority and get your MP involved in backing your claim, the more likely you are to get that support. But it's not that you have to follow this really strict criteria. It's that you just have to make your case to the best of your ability. And we're working with those local authorities to expand the criteria that they choose to accept people or not. So that's the best advice I can give, really, that the additional restrictions grant is sort of the key for that group, because like I said, there's 1.6 million pounds out there. There's a further 425 million pounds to come. That money is specifically for businesses like that are struggling, haven't had other support, or that support wasn't enough. So that they perfectly fit within that group.
Amazing. And just to go back to this question from Tony Winder, she actually says, what do you think the future holds for self-employed therapists who rent spaces in salons, especially with the news that the Supreme Court ruled in favour of the Uber workers as opposed to the company? They ask, will this be the end of gig economy workers who work in this sector, do you think?
To be honest, I think it's too early to say. I think there's going to be lots of conversations going on. And like you say, that Uber's situation is landmark, because they were challenging that for the last 5 years. But it will be interesting to see the impact that it has. But I have no doubt that there's probably conversations going on with a lot of different larger organisations, like the likes of Uber, to discuss sort of where we go from here. But I think the fact that we have so many freelance people within our sector is a lot of times a strength, but it is a result of an existing tax model. And I think if we were going to be looking at changing that, there sort of has to be better support for those people to move back into a more traditional tax model. And at the moment, the way that the tax system works doesn't really support doesn't really create a level playing field for premises-based and mobile-based businesses.
But fingers crossed, this has sort of highlighted that as the way that our industry does sort of stand out. Bit of a unicorn in that respect. So the one thing I wanted to wrap up with was, fingers crossed, we do have hopefully some dates to work to in April for reopening across all of the nations. So how will the NHBF be supporting professionals after reopening?
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, we're keeping everything crossed for the 12th of April. And the conversations we've had with government is, especially in England, where they were really, really careful when they laid out that roadmap of having that 5-week gap between the different dates. And there was a real deliberacy to that, where they wanted to make sure that they were giving adequate time to make sure that sort of a sudden rise in cases when something's reopens again and then has time to come back down before you then move on to the next stage. And I do think they've got the balance quite right, but they have privately said to us that they do feel confident that they will meet all of those deadlines, and that's given us real assurance.
Yeah, gosh, that's a relief to hear.
Yeah. I think what's been highlighted over the last week, though, where we've had Scotland and Wales making announcements about their reopening, is concerns about whether England might change their mind about reopening just hair before they reopen the rest of personal care. And I actually spoke to Department of Business this morning about that, and said that the sector's freaking out, to be quite honest, that you're gonna renege on your promise that you're going to reopen the whole of the sector. But I think we all remember this time last year when they made a really poor decision to reopen us in a very staggered way, and they got a massive amount of backlash.
Yeah.
And I do genuinely think since that date, they've been in constant communication with us, and I feel that we've effectively communicated that the sector as a whole should reopen. And certainly the reassurance I got back this morning was we have no intention of separating the sector. The roadmap is published, and the roadmap specifically sets out that the sector in its entirety will be reopened on the 12th. So I hope that gives people some assurance. I know that doesn't help the situation in Wales and Scotland, and I am so disappointed for the wider sector, because for us, they've been able to present no scientific or medical evidence to support the need to split the sector. And I'd say specifically in regards to your readers and the people in your industries particularly, I genuinely do not see how they are any less safe than people cutting hair. And we've stressed that point at every opportunity, and I just do not understand the mentality with Scotland and Wales. I mean, it was said to me privately that it could be something to do with the fact that the legislation is being drafted by an entirely male cohort, but I really hope that that's not the case. With regards to the date, I really hope that we get to that point. I think it relies on all of us continuing to do the right things from a personal and social point of view, in terms of maintaining all of the different social distancing restrictions we need to do to get to that point. I would hate it to be where we can see the finish line, so people start to relax in terms of how careful they're being, because ultimately we need to reopen if we're going to save the sector. And as much as I really hope that the ARG grants start getting out there and things, the reality is if we don't open, then we can only sort of continue as we are for so long. And what we need to do as the NHBF is now start working with the government around rebuilding the consumer confidence that, frankly, they were partly responsible for destroying last summer by choosing to sort of define us as high risk and more dangerous than other sectors. That's done untold damage to our sector. They have a responsibility to help us rebuild. So we're working with them around developing a consumer confidence campaign and getting people back into our sector and the high street as well, more generally. Also about how and when people are going to have to start repaying a lot of the debt that they've had to accrue in order to not
go under.
A business go under, absolutely. And how we manage that over a long-term period. That's a really big discussion. There's also a lot around skills and training, where because of the restrictions that they've put in place, the first thing to go is your apprentice, because there's frankly just not the space to do it. And also by moving to more freelance and mobile businesses, those people don't employ apprentices, and so therefore what's happening to the skills of the sector? And really just mainly just ensuring that this representation we've got with government stays. We don't want it to be a short thing where we've only been interesting to them because of COVID, but actually we've got a lot to say for ourselves as a sector. The fact that we're so largely female, the fact that we are generally a young one, the fact that we are such a flexible employer and we can support women around childcare responsibilities, and having such a large cohort of part-time or flexible working staff, because of the very nature of our industry, supports that. We've got a lot to give as an industry to the wider society, and I sort of feel like it's the future of that flexibility, and working around other things in your life is something that I think is really positive, and it's such a positive part of our sector that I feel that they need to be supporting that more, and really championing us as an industry. So the job isn't done even when we're open. For me, it's sort of it's just beginning, and we need to make sure that we're staying relevant to them, and we're keeping our foot in the door.
Yeah, and keeping up that momentum, because what you guys have been doing has just been incredible to see. I mean, to think how much has sort of changed, like you said, in the last year has been just a complete step change. And I think it's been, yeah, it's time that our industry was in the spotlight the way it has been. I think that's sort of it for today. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been amazing to sort of talk through this, and hopefully it's given people some clarity on what's out there, but also a big boost of positivity as well, which I think is very, very much needed. This video will be saved to our social media platforms, and of course, if you had any sort of if you wanted any more information, and also if I believe you guys have a lot of resources as well, the best website to go to would be the nhbf.co.uk. You can also follow the NHBF on social media. The handle is, gosh, I'll say it one more time, NHBF social, all one word, of course. That's for Facebook and Instagram. And of course, there is all the latest information as well in the Scratch column that you guys have with us. But apart from that, I just want to say thank you so much for joining me today. It's been amazing to talk, and we're just keeping everything crossed for those back to work dates.
And I just wanted to say, like, good luck to the sector. The strength and tenacity you've shown to get to the point of we're less than a month away from reopening now. I'm just in constant awe of the sector being so resilient. And I just think, as well, being predominantly women, we've also been carers during this time. We've been childcare providers, been teachers, and I just, incredibly proud to represent you. So keep going. We're nearly there.
That's it. All right. Well, thank you so much, and hopefully see you soon.
See you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.